Yeah, we are live, Outlawed Thoughts episode 48 with special guest Chill Goblin. Uh,
Nice. What's up, Dan Curtis Thompson in the chat? Fuck yeah.
yeah, we got okay.
The
So looks like shared
Outlaws.
chats and all that are working out good too. Then, yeah. So this is a little bit of a different one. I messaged you, I think, yesterday on Twitter. Kind of just came across your YouTube channel and really enjoyed the last video you did on Kennedy. I think the other video I got most of the way through was your video on CIA shenanigans.
Oh yeah, that
And
was an old one.
yeah,
Yeah,
and
that's
that was also great. So we'll
thanks,
maybe
dude.
talk a little bit about your like creative process and some of the stuff you do because that's always cool. And often I think YouTubers don't do that as often. Like we all, YouTube. I used to edit, so that was kind of my thing. I used to edit for a few other channels that were out there in the fray, and then I
Oh,
kind of
no way. Can you say
so
who, or is it like a big secret?
no, I've talked about most of them are in the like kind of those horror videos you see on YouTube where it's all
Word.
like yeah, it's all like the narrator videos where they'll narrate over a bunch of like
Oh, like the cartoon things
pastry.
where it's like
No, see that's what I didn't like
Mr.
about it is you
Beast showed up in my house with a ghost, like those
right
kinds of
or
things.
like people so what a lot of the channels do is they'll take and these are not the ones I worked for, but this is more of what the gist of the videos, sort of like a Nexpo, if you've ever seen that channel or channels like that where it's it'll be like stock photos and videos and then they'll narrate some story over top of that. I would be the
Oh,
guy editing in all the pictures and videos and going and getting kind of yeah. I moved more into doing podcast clips for people and stuff, but now I'm just focusing on kind of doing my own thing. That's been the focus lately. And just
nice. That's fun. You're going out
uh
on your own, doing your own editing.
yeah, yeah, a little more fun. But that's what kind of draws me
Mhm.
towards different channels on YouTube. If I come across somebody while I'm browsing on my own terms, I'll find people that I'm like, oh, your style of editing's really good or the art style's good, everything kind of meshes together, right? Do you do like all of that for your own stuff or you?
Oh, me? Oh, yeah, yeah. So, okay, yeah. So my videos have like, I do a drawing process kind of like animations in the background. Um, and I use the iPad app Procreate to draw with, and it takes a record of every like brush stroke you do. And
Right.
at the end, you can like export a video of it. And I find it's like a good way of kind of maintaining attention during my videos because so if it's just a guy talking the whole time without anything visually interesting going on, it can be a little bit boring. Or I don't know, maybe it's just because like I have ADHD and I'm like easily distracted, and like a lot of times when I watch videos I'm like, listen, you lost me, sorry, this is a
Right.
good topic and I'm really interested, but I don't know. So I try to make my videos as like engaging as possible, and I put a lot of like effort into the art in the background stuff. I've sort of like evolved now to doing like full on animations, not just like
Right.
drawing process stuff. But and that takes a long ass time. Oh my god.
Yeah,
But
looking at the
yeah.
Kennedy video in particular, all the different moving stuff in there, I was like, "Oh, that had to have been like, oh."
Oh
Because
my
that
god,
video is
dude.
like an hour and over an hour and 20 or so, and that's
Yeah,
like,
it's like
yeah,
an hour
that had
40 altogether.
yeah.
It's my longest one. I'm going to really try and make my next video short because like I killed myself making this one. Maybe I shouldn't say that. I didn't kill myself. But I worked really hard, and it was like it was a lot of just like waking up in the morning, working on this video for like 20 hours, and then
And
going
then
like right
yeah,
to sleep. It was like
yeah.
not a good workflow. So yeah,
Yeah, I
I'm
don't
gonna be a little bit more half-assed. If you go to my channel, my more recent video is going to be like the most impressive one ever.
No, it is
um,
legitimately great. I have brothers who watch a lot of the same YouTube stuff as me, and like the my
mm,
younger brother's gonna watch that video too because it looks good.
nice.
Um,
Getting the
it
younger brother demographic in there. I
yeah,
love it.
well, younger. He's like 18. It's high. He's still
Oh,
technically,
nice.
I
How old are
guess.
you?
I'm 23.
Yeah, that's a younger brother. What do you mean?
Mhm.
You're like,
Mhm.
nah, he's technically.
Yeah.
He's technically.
Yeah,
Like numbers, he would be considered younger. Oh, I'm getting some.
I was just thinking, as a person with ADHD, I appreciate that Mr. Goblin does those background animations.
Yo,
Yeah,
thank you, Theo Lane. I love that. I love to hear. I love to hear it.
I have always had oh, you know what? One of my favorite series ever, and this is gonna sound cheesy, but on the History Channel, there was the Brad Meltzer's Decoded. It was this like cheesy
Mm.
kind of conspiracy-esque show, but they broke a lot of it was like showing the reality of a lot of the stuff too. But I loved that show for that same reason. Because they were always doing something. There was always activity on the screen. And I feel like YouTube videos
What's the show
today,
called?
that was Brad Meltzer's Decoded. It was just something popped in my head because I'm thinking about that that kind of attention grabbing stuff that works in the background. With them, it was like cuts and stuff. And with your stuff, it's all very fluid. Everything works together. The animations, like,
Thank you.
and I know that's what's hard because that's what takes time to get down pat, is getting all of those the rhythm of a video with the editing to stay in flow. Um, a
Mm-hmm.
lot of what I do now is like even on small scales for like social media accounts. Like I have a TikTok that I do where I do like sync up music to like war footage or things like that because it's like an anti-war thing. And that
Oh,
kind of
cool.
stuff even
What's your other
is
channel?
I have so I have there's Radix, which is one that I run on TikTok. It's I have to find out
Oh,
the
right,
exact
TikTok. You said
at for it.
okay.
Yeah.
I got a
And
TikTok
then
account. I
there's
never post anything there.
I do the one that I've been using right now that's like my main one is just under Outlawed Thoughts, and that's just short videos talking about like when the UFO stuff was happening in Alaska. I'm like, well,
Mm.
I know that's going to get views, so I'll make a video talking about like what's happening because I'm in Alaska, and so my like location stuff shows up first and stuff like that. A lot of it's like algorithm crap on TikTok. I kind of dislike the like way it disperses content on TikTok. It doesn't really
Oh
work
yeah.
properly. Yeah,
I'm not
if
super familiar with the way the TikTok algorithm works. I just know that like every time I log onto it, I lose like 3 hours of my life, and I
mhm.
can't stop it. So addictive.
It's like the YouTube Shorts rabbit hole, man. If I start
It is like that,
scrolling through
or the
YouTube
Instagram
Shorts,
Reels.
I'll just
Reels.
keep going. It's like
It's
hard to
wild.
stop. No, I had so when you did the Kennedy video, I was
Yeah,
talking
yeah.
before the
Yo,
stream
can I just
started.
address defund the police in the chat for a second here? Um, because yeah, just wanted to quickly say, defund the police says, "Yo, chill, Goblin. Your Kennedy video was pretty mid. You should have covered the CIA more. Missed a lot. Your other videos are pretty legit, though. Appreciate that. Oliver Stone actually just released a pretty good documentary about the JFK assassination a few years ago. You should have watched that before you created your JFK video. Yeah, so I mean, like, I take it that defund the police, you're of the belief that the CIA did it, which I think is like a totally respectable opinion. I mean, like, I have believe that. Like, I'm pretty much like I'm on the fence. Like, I'm agnostic about it. And at the end of the day, I could be convinced, but I went with like my conclusion is in that video is that, yeah, I mean, I think the most likely thing, but like you said, like we will never know for sure. We won't. There's no way
Yeah.
to confirm anything. But I think that like what I actually believe is like most likely is the lone dipshit thing. I recommend the Oliver Stone thing. I've seen all of Oliver Stone stuff. I saw the documentary. What's it called? JFK Revisited,
Yeah.
Into the Rabbit Hole or whatever. And he
Mm.
a oh shit! Did I just change microphones randomly? That's
I'm
weird.
not sure. Something happened weird, but
Do I
I still hear you.
still hear me? Okay. Oh no, it looks like I'm still using my mic. This is making
Yeah,
more
you
sense.
are. Yeah, you're
Okay,
good.
okay. All right, whatever. That was weird. Okay. But yeah, no, I watched like the documentary movie, his documentary series, and I watched, of course, the original JFK movie from like 1990 by Oliver Stone. It's like a fiction
Right.
piece. Have you seen that, by the way?
I have not seen the fiction piece one.
It is worth a watch. It is
I'll
I
have
think
to
like
check it
it gets
out.
almost everything wrong, but it's like
But it's fun.
it's very fun, and it's got like so many huge actors in it. It's wild. Like every scene, you're like, "What? This guy's in it? John Candy's in this? Kevin Bacon's in this? Fucking what's his name? Yeah, I don't know. It's just got like a ton of like Tommy Lee Jones. What the fuck?
Yeah,
And
just cameo
it's really
moments.
excellently made. I think that like a lot of the stuff about a lot of the specific things it gets into, I think have been kind of satisfactorily debunked in my. But the good thing is, did put a whole bunch of eyes on the JFK thing, and it caused the government to release a bunch of like secret CIA documents, and we
Right.
learned so much stuff from that. So that movie, and like honestly, JFK skepticism in general has been like really, really good. And yes, I also totally agree with defund the police that I could have gone. I would have liked to have covered the CIA more as well. I would have liked to
The
have.
other
There's
thing
so
is you
much I
get
didn't
to
talk
an
about.
hour and
It
a
was already too
half.
long though. Yeah,
Yeah.
it's already like way too long. I actually cut out so much stuff. I had a whole long section about the autopsy, which is one of the main
Wild.
things that they talk about, like in the conspiracy movement. Um, I just couldn't include
Curtis
everything. So
LeMay smoking the cigar in the corner,
yeah,
and yeah.
I heard. Yeah, so I heard that he was smoking the cigar, and then he one of the doctors went. There's like during the autopsy, he was in the room and he was
Right.
smoking a cigar, which you are not allowed to do that. You're not allowed to smoke a cigar while a dead body's getting like cut up and examined by like doctors. It's supposed to be like a sterile
Let alone the
environment.
president.
Yeah, he's like, what the fuck, dude? And I heard that like a doctor went up to him and was like, "Could you please put that out, sir?" And he just like didn't answer them and just kept smoking it.
Yeah.
And I've heard that like from a few places, and I looked to find like actual confirmed evidence of that. I couldn't find anything, so I wanted to include that, but I didn't. I don't know. Maybe that is true. But in the Bugliosi book, which is one of the ones who doesn't believe in the conspiracy, I tried to read a lot of shit, but he says that there's a bunch of like misinformation about the autopsy, and some people say there's like 6 generals, some people say there's like all these
Right.
drunk chiefs in there, but apparently the only thing that's confirmed that I could find was that there was one general in the room during the autopsy, and it wasn't Curtis LeMay. So I don't know. I mean, I could be wrong.
Right.
I
Well,
wish
it's
that I could have nailed that
all
down,
of
but
those things get back to the kind of the idea that like we can all kind of come to conclusions, and I think different camps get formed, especially with the JFK stuff. You have people who fall into the more of this is a single dipshit theory, which I think you put
yeah,
pretty well in your video, and then just so many other kind of subgroups. So you have people who believe there was a shooter on the grassy knoll, and people
mm-hmm.
I've heard wacky stories in general, kind of pulling from all different sides of the internet, but I
Yeah,
always come to the conclusion that there is never going to be, and I think this is something people have the feeling of now. This is kind of the craze, is this craze of we want the files released, which is true. We want all files
oh yeah,
released. They should be out there.
please do that. Yeah.
But I also feel as though there's a tendency for people to feel that there's going to be some magic smoking gun file that just
Mm-hmm.
lays out this is who did it. This was the real thing. And it's like, well, no, that's never really going to happen. You're always going to have more of the Oliver Stone approach where you kind of make a bunch of stuff portraying that this might be what took place, and maybe a couple years later somebody will do the same from another perspective, and you're just going to have that kind of pull and push.
Yeah. Yep.
um
100% agreed. It's like, it's true crime is what it is.
yeah,
It's history, but it's also true crime. And it's like,
yeah,
you can listen to the Serial podcast, or you can watch like Making a Murder, and you're not going to solve it. You're not
no,
going to know for sure, but it's like interesting. And like, you can have your own opinion. And, unless you're in a position of power in the U.S.
right,
government, your opinion doesn't really
unless you know something we
affect
don't.
anything. Yeah, like it. So it's just it's interesting. It's fun, and the real benefit of it, I think, and I talk about it in my video, is that like it leads you down. Like you start researching the CIA, and then you find out all the shit that they actually did
Well, you
confirmed,
find out about like
and you're like,
Castro, and you
excuse
find out
me,
about
yeah,
like Vietnam and all this stuff where
yeah,
everybody, it's like this is all crooked, sideways, backwards. Like
yes, the
and
All
I
the
think
shady
what's
shit.
interesting about that too is that it it superseded politics. Like,
Mm.
regardless of what side of the political jargon anybody is on, everybody can go, well, it kind of looks like something hokey happened here. And then also all this other stuff was going on with the CIA and all these other agencies. It doesn't really matter what political side of the fence you land on. You can still realize this is screwy. Like,
Hmm.
there was some legitimate, like, even just war crimes
Totally.
and
Oh yeah.
brutal stuff.
That's a
And
funny thing to
it's like,
say. That sentence was like, even just the war crimes. You're like,
well,
you
it is
know,
kind of like, it is
even these
even just the war
tiny
crimes.
crimes
Well,
against humanity. You're like,
because I think today Americans especially view like a war crime that goes on abroad is never going to be seen, and I know this is a scary thought, but it's never going to be seen the same as the like soccer mom sitting in her like house. She's never going to see the war crime overseas the same as like the government funneling drugs, for instance, into the street, and like
mm-hmm.
like, which was another thing they did. And it's like, yeah, it's like, I think they probably will respond more to that than even the war crime. Like, which
Yeah.
is sad, but I do think it's true. Where it's like, yeah, that's kind of that's the knee jerk reaction. I always go back to Scott Horton, was
Mm.
mentioning once in this discussion he had about Waco. He was talking about he lived near Waco during the time he was doing that as a like a cashier person. And I'm
Okay.
hijacking his story, but while he was working there, it was during Waco going on, and the soccer moms and people would be in the checkout line saying things about Waco because it was interrupting the television in the towns, and they were complaining about it, going, "Well, why don't they just go in there and take care of it?" Things like that.
Like that's why they
And
should do the siege or
exactly,
whatever. They're
like,
like,
well, exactly, like it was
this is getting in between me and my stories.
exactly like that. And when I
This
hear
is supposed to be
stories like
my
that,
time. I'm
when I
watching
hear
Melrose Place.
when I hear stories like that, it makes me realize that like the fragility of like if people's day-to-day lives are affected, that will shift them towards change way faster than something happening thousands of miles away. Like
Oh
it's
yeah, yeah,
just
yeah.
it's a completely positive to negative situation. And so I do feel like, for instance, like the stuff with Yemen, I talk about that a lot.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And how
Yeah,
horrible that
you
stuff
don't
is.
see a lot of
And
shit about that in the news
right, exactly. You're never going to see like a
because
sea of
Saudi Arabia
your
is ally, and
right,
obviously, I guess the
exactly.
U.S. and Canada, where I'm from, we're both of our countries are sending arms to
Hmm.
Saudi Arabia. We're like arming them
Yeah.
in their like brutal war. I mean, yeah. Have you ever read Manufacturing Consent with Chomsky?
Um, Chomsky. I've read some of Chomsky's like college paper stuff, but I
Oh,
haven't read
really?
any of the books.
The papers he wrote in college?
No, there's like
Oh,
there's a series of papers. So I didn't go to college. What I did was I would get these like download a bunch of different papers that were just distributed amongst colleges that you
yeah.
could use so that I could do it for free basically and just read the stuff. So it was a lot of like condensed works of his by other people. So it'll be
Okay.
like so
Yeah.
and
There you
so
go.
they'll take a book
Honestly,
and then
he goes
it's a whole
on.
yeah.
He's a long-winded guy. I like that. One of his things with Manufacturing Consent is where he's like, the mainstream media won't let you speak for more than 2 minutes in between commercial breaks, and that stops you from really telling them about what's really going on because you don't have enough time. And like that's one part I mostly agree with him about Manufacturing Consent. That part I'm like, Chomsky, that might just be a Chomsky problem. Like that might just
That
be
might just be a you
you
thing.
can't say anything. Chomsky takes a long time. Like he's like, he talks slow.
Chomsky on TikTok. It's
Yeah,
just
no. He's like, TikTok is works perfectly for the media elite. I can't explain about the tragedy of East Timor in the.
Oh, I think your microphone. Oh
He's a
no,
funny guy.
it's not your microphone. It was just a glitch on my end or somebody's end.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I wonder what that was. What I was going to say about Manufacturing Consent, though, real quick. He has this concept where he talks about worthy victims and unworthy victims, and he'll be like, the U.S. will always show people who are being attacked by states that they are enemies with as worthy victims, and people who are being like abused and attacked by states who are their allies as unworthy victims, which usually means that they just won't talk about them. So talk about like Palestinians, talk about like, yeah, Chomsky, the book's from a while ago. Chomsky talks about East Timor compared to Cambodia, where it's like one of these states is an enemy of the U.S. So the
Right.
Cambodian genocide was covered like in a huge amount of detail. East Timor, where the CIA killed about 50% of the population of this tiny country, and like populated it with Indonesians. Like that shit, the U.S. media didn't cover at all because it's like, yeah, it
Right.
goes against their things. I don't even remember why I brought that up. It had
He
something to do with what you
has
were saying.
Chomsky has, since we're on the topic of Chomsky has one of the better like YouTube videos I've watched to him. Just like a clip was him breaking down all of the war crimes of the presidents,
Ooh, yeah, I've seen that.
and then he had another clip of him just covering. I think it was with the New York Times or some journalist, like uh, kind of stoogey group, but he was talking about the Israel Palestine thing, and it's just the best breakdown I've heard. And I was like, okay, well, that's
Cool.
that's simple.
Oh, I
He
haven't
put it
seen
in
that.
very simplistic terms.
That sounds really
Um,
interesting. Yeah, I'll have to check that out because yeah, I
yeah,
mean that's like it is difficult to talk about that. That is one thing that yeah, it is hard to talk to get into the Israel Palestine thing in 2 minutes or less between commercial breaks, where like
oh
you
yeah,
could convince somebody who doesn't really know much about what's actually going on over there.
yeah.
Um, yeah, Defund the
I
Police
would.
says Chomsky's pretty based. Sorry, his libertarian socialist thing is kind of weird. I don't know how he combines the two. Oh, nice. So if I click on it, it shows up. Did I do that or did you do that? Did I
I
do
did
that?
that. I
Oh, you
think
did.
I
Okay.
have to do it, but I
Okay.
can
Yeah. Okay. I
highlight
guess I don't
them.
have the power to do it. I was trying to, maybe if I click, because I saw you do no, okay. You had to do it.
If you
But
point
anyway,
one out, I can grab it.
okay. Hell yeah. But yeah, I mean, like, yeah, libertarian, socialist, like libertarian. I take it you're confused because libertarian is typically in the US thought of as like a right wing ideology. But around the world, outside of North America, because I'm from Canada and we use the libertarian the same way as you guys generally. But
Yeah.
libertarian is actually originally a left wing thing. It's one of the many words that the far right sort of steals from the left. It was a conscious thing. Actually, Murray Rothbard, who is an anarcho-capitalist, talks about how he literally like says, you can look up this quote, Murray Rothbard, he said something along the lines of, we have stolen a word from the left. We have done this now. When people say libertarian, they don't think of left-wing libertarians. But yes,
Right.
libertarian was originally like a libertarian socialist, somebody in the bottom left of the political compass, if you are familiar with that little internet
Yeah.
memeable thing.
I have tended in this kind of last few years politically to stop referring to things as specific like subgroups, because I
Interesting.
started being very irritated by that. I have always considered myself, and I always preface this by telling people that I have traveled all across the US. I've traveled
Okay.
a little bit outside the US, but nothing really extravagant. I'm doing that at the end of this year.
Cool.
But I have
You're doing something
um
extravagant at the end of the year?
well, I'm gonna leave the country at the end of the year, do some more like
Ooh. You never
overseas
have done that
travel.
before?
Not other than like just briefly outside of like, border town stuff.
Okay, cool. Like
So
Mexico? Canada?
yeah, yeah.
You been to Canada?
Both.
You been to
Well,
my
because
country?
I'm in Alaska, so if we want to
Oh, right.
drive out of here, we kind of
You're in
have to.
Alaska. It's
Yeah.
colder up there than it is for me. I'm in Toronto.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I'm over in Seward, which is a little tiny coastal town over here.
Oh,
It's
okay, okay, okay.
like 2,000
Okay.
people in it.
Sorry. I'm getting us off track. It's my ADHD. I gotta just
Oh no,
get.
you're
What were we
fine.
talking about? You were saying. I think you're about to like say
Oh,
something
so
profound about your ideology.
Because I'm from Alaska, like my view on like outward politics are a little shifted because our population
Okay.
here is like 730,000 and we live on a
Mm.
giant piece of land.
Are you like a
There
Sarah Palin leftist?
No, 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 no. I'm not a lefty.
What would you
I
consider yourself?
if I'm in normal conversation, I refer to myself as libertarian. If you break down my
Mm.
like more view stuff, I am a fan of people like Rothbard and those
Oh, no
individuals.
way.
Yeah, but
Really?
I
Okay.
I don't I don't, I also don't, like I don't do the whole argumentative politics crap that I get,
Sure, sure,
like,
sure, sure. Yeah,
that
yeah,
because
yeah, yeah.
that's it. I'm not the type of person that goes, "I want you to be politically what I am because you need to be." That's just not my shtick. I'm like, "No,
That's fair.
I didn't go to, public school. I was completely homeschooled, self-taught. I really up until about 9, and then from then on, I kind of figured out my own shit.
Okay,
We
fair enough.
lived in I grew up in a middle of nowhere, this place called Big Lake, so I didn't have my upbringing is more key to being very individual. I didn't have, like, backstops for things, and we kind of were, you're 20 minutes away from the next person and then 2 hours away from a hospital or a store, so it's
Okay.
like,
All
so
right. So
you
you're a like a right-wing libertarian? Fair to
I
say? Like
would
you're
fall more on that side
excuse
of
me.
things, but I also, like, there are certain things that right-wing libertarians do that I don't agree with, I think are incorrect. One
Mhm,
of them
mhm,
is,
mhm.
like one of those things is, like, the whole, I see a lot of right-wing libertarians more on the trans exclusionary stuff. That's not really
Oh,
my
okay, so
thing.
you're a trans ally?
I
You're into
I don't put badges on it, but I don't have an issue with trans people, for instance, who are consenting adult people who are doing
Sure.
things on their own. I don't need to have
Yeah.
a problem with any of that. And maybe that's cuz I've, like,
No,
been
that's
around
great.
those people a lot, cuz I live in where I live is kind of an area with these bars, and so during the summer we have a lot of, like, tourists that come down, and so we get a lot of people from California, a lot of people from New York, a lot of people from places in the US where that just kind of culture exists more, and so I feel like I don't, and I also work at a hotel, so, like, I
All
see
right.
people all the time, so I'm not an antisocial person. So I never got into the, like, "This is culture and ruining culture," that side of things. I
Right.
don't mesh with that.
The racist side of
Well, yeah,
libertarianism, you
a
might
little
say?
bit. There is, there's more analytical stuff that I get. Like, I understand, some of the debate around the more minor stuff. I understand, at least to an extent, why it's happening. Not necessarily that I agree with how it's happening. I think the government needs to probably have less involvement in it in general, but that's my own kind of personal side of it. But that also, again, I have to preface by saying it's because I come from an area where, like, again, everything's, the cities are separated by larger distances because everything's sort of
Mhm.
stretched out. It's very kind of city by city based instead of this kind of state culture. And that's something that I think probably is a reason why we see places like Texas pop up as having some of these opinions in small areas, and then you go to cities and they're not less so of that. And I think
Mm.
that makes sense, because of the way that people live. When you look at Alaska, it's like, well, everybody lives like that because it's all separated. So
So just if I'm understanding you correctly, you're saying like there's something about being in a rural community that sort of tends toward political right wing kind of thing?
I think there can be, yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
I think
It's
there is
interesting because
here.
I don't think that that's necessarily true. I think that for example, in Canada, so like generally in Canada, that is the case. People in rural areas tends to be more um, conservative generally, but that wasn't always the case. In fact, in the early 20th century in Canada, in where was it? Manitoba? No. Saskatchewan, I think. That's where the like Socialist Party of Canada originated. The CCP, the Cooperative Commonwealth Party. Is that what stands for? I don't really remember. Anyway, and that's the party that gave Canada like healthcare, like universal healthcare. And they're actually the first socialist party in North America, political party. And they were like very much like in favor of unions and solidarity with the working class. They were in favor of democratic socialism. They were very left wing. I mean, compared to the other options, and much more left wing than that party is today. Now it's called the NDP. it is really interesting because almost everyone who supported them were farmers. They're rural, small town farmers, and the way that they would talk about socialism, um, and left wing kind of government styles. Yeah, Cooperative Commonwealth Party, is that what that is, guy? Uh, it's sort of, yes, Alexander Gonzalez, that kind of remote living lends itself to collectivism, and it had to. It was like, this was like a difficult time. It was like prairie, class consciousness, where it's like, we need to help one another. We need to help one another. And while we're like already in this community with one another and in this kind of collectivist organization, why don't we also like fight for political change that helps the working class rather than the, you know, power
Well,
elite?
I definitely think you see that kind of living, um, not necessarily as much now, but you definitely saw that kind of living in the native communities in Alaska. They have a much more cooperative kind of system of living. They sort of got that kind of meandered by the fact that you have kind of the government system come in there into the rural areas there in the state, and it
Mm-hmm.
is under the guise of like making certain situations better. But I have a lot of native friends who live in those areas, and like the drug problems and some of the things that have come with that is like such an issue now that it's like, yeah, it's harsh. And
Yeah.
they've taken that kind of living from them. I definitely don't agree with that. Like I my position would be more that I think, like, as long as people can cooperate, I don't care how anybody lives. Like as
Yeah.
long as there's not I like and I
Okay.
think that's something that, like, I know people like
Yeah.
will put like a, somebody in the chat with Western libertarian and that kind of, but that's exactly why I moved away from putting like
A
advanced
label.
labels on it,
Yeah.
was because I look at things and go, well, okay, if that's what you want to call me, you can call me that. That's fine.
Yeah.
I'm going to
What's
refer
funny?
to myself as a certain way. And in the same way that, by the way, in the same way that if somebody wants me to refer to them some way, I do the exact same thing. It's like, I'm
Word.
not going to call somebody, if somebody came up to me and goes, I'm a Republican conservative, right? And
Right.
their political ideology is clearly not Republican conservative. I can tell them you're not a Republican conservative. You're just not. Sorry. Like, but at the end of
Mm-hmm.
the day, they can just continue living their life calling themselves that. Nobody can like stop them. So
Yeah.
I run into this problem where I'm like, yeah, at the end of the day, I think it just matters on what are, if we're all individually going, hey, we all want this one thing, like, so we should work towards it. Like that was always my idea of like the coalition building, and like you need to have kind of, for the instance, like anti-war stuff. Like if there's ever an opportunity to end a war, like legitimately, I don't
Mm-hmm.
think it's going to happen because of one group of political people. It's going to be
Mm-hmm.
because a bunch of people in the US or another country, wherever the populace is congregated, goes, we don't like what you're doing, we'd like it to end.
Yeah.
um so I think it's
Yeah,
more of a,
Lonesome Hiker. Sorry, just to quickly point out, Lonesome Hiker in the chat. Even the Inuit and Dorset and Thule, apologies if I'm pronouncing that wrong, peoples of northern Alaska to Greenland lived in groups working together.
yep.
Basically, just a self-reliant community capable of self-governance. And yeah, like there's a really interesting, like sort of parallel between the way that kind of the sort of Eurocentric or European concept of anarchy is very similar to how a lot of indigenous groups, operated, and like the Anishinaabe as well, to go down a little further south.
Especially in coastal areas in this state, because you had unique situations with the native populations here land wise, because in the coastal communities they were literally landlocked for like six
Yeah,
7 months out of the year.
it's not easy to
So it's
live
like
like
you
that.
can't get anywhere. um and because most people don't realize that there's areas in the coastal areas of Alaska where they're dealing with a lot of ice buildup and stuff like that that happens. So you can have a period where there's not really a clear way to fly in and travel, because flying is the only way to get to that area. And if there's
Hmm.
bad weather, blizzards 4 months out of the year, that means you're just cut off for 4 months out of the year. Like you're
For
not getting
real.
shipments, you're not getting, food, or whatever the case may be. That's why so
Yo,
many people over here still use like wood heat and stuff. It's
yo,
because
how do
it's
I?
like,
Sorry. Yeah, wood heat. You're saying?
yeah, because it's like because the concept is, you'll even see like newer homes here that are like have oil, like have the big oil tanks, and they use
Right.
natural gases or whatever, and then they'll still have a chimney because most of the homes here, if you have the option, you're going to put a chimney and a fireplace in just in case because
Mm.
you never know what happens. There's always trees, the whole state's
Right, right,
covered
right.
in them. Uh,
Yo, can I just ask, how do I post in the chat? Is that an option for me, or
I
do I?
think
I
you
guess do I have
can.
to go to?
I think you can go write a message in there. If not, then you can open up YouTube, I think, and just do it that way.
Okay.
Because I don't know
Um.
how to. But
Good.
at the bottom of your little chat thing on Restream, does it have a spot where you can type?
Just wanted to post a link.
Oh, you can. If you want me to open a link, you can do it in the private chat. So under where your mute and your
Oh
camera
yeah.
button are, there's a little thing that says private
I
chat.
see private chat, and I was like, well, that doesn't. I don't want it to be private, but
Oh,
that's a
okay.
link I wanted to post. If you can post it, maybe I don't
Yeah,
know.
I
This is
can do it
all
that way.
so overwhelming technology to me.
No, that works
Um,
perfect. I can just post it
but
that way.
just like wanted to shout out Twin Rabbit, another YouTuber who has this video. So just from what people were sort of talking about here, and like I see a lot of people talking about it in the chat about how the indigenous communities of North America, a lot of them, not all of them, but a lot of them have very similar kind of uh, organizational structures as the anarchist, kind of leftist, libertarian, socialist, uh, you know, European ideologies dictated. There's a really good video, and honestly, the only video I've seen on this by the channel Twin Rabbit, and highly recommend that. It's an indigenous creator. So I just wanted to
Hmm.
throw that in the mix. Hit that up if you
I
wanted to
just put it
check it
in the
out.
chat, so it is in the YouTube chat
Hell
now.
yeah, that's what I'm talking about. All right, I'll send the links over to you. But yeah, okay, so just to take like a little pause here. So I normally don't speak on stream with like right wing libertarians. I know you're not like super into labels or whatever. That's like generally like something you're
No, you're all
interested
good.
in or like aligned with. Uh, I should probably do more research when somebody asked me to do a stream with them. But sounds like we agree on a lot of things. And I'm also, you mentioned you're not like super argumentative kind of
No.
politically, and I'm not either. I'm not like a debate kind of guy.
No,
And
I saw your for instance, I saw your Twitter bio. I it did like I
yeah,
saw and so I don't like I'm not gonna so I've talked to a few people on interviews here.
uh-huh,
Only
uh-huh.
one of the people I've talked to in my interview stuff on the channel has been political. And that's
Oh,
only because
interesting.
she makes skits. That was Daywalker comedy. She does
Oh, skit like
like
political skits.
some of it. Yeah, it's more of just like satire on like history or
It's
political
called
stuff.
Daywalker comedy.
Yeah, yeah,
Oh,
she's on,
okay.
yeah, she does,
What's
like,
her?
TikTok and Twitter and
What are
stuff.
her politics?
She's libertarian, I'm not sure if she's right or left, I don't
Oh,
think she's
oh, interesting. So yeah, like
yeah.
like libertarian left and libertarian right, like there are similarities. Like I think both libertarians right and left both would like to limit state power. Um, that's like we don't like that.
I've
I
always
think
taken
like
the position that if communities looked more, um, if and this is gonna sound wonky, but if there was a way to make communities more like slightly separated in the sense that there was a driving position or there was some government separation between how they operated, right? That
mm,
itself is already like a big difference in the way we are operating. So, like, for instance, like right now, you
right.
go from federal to state government and then your city, municipality, and shit like that.
Hmm.
I think if that was less of a problem, I think both sides, whether you're left, right, sideways, are gonna do
Hmm.
better. And mainly because I think that, like, for instance, like my perfect world, utopia, whatever word you want to describe to it, would be, well, yeah, and anybody can have their like commune and socialism set up, and whatever version of whatever world they want to live
Okay.
in economically, they can do all of that. I don't see any
Okay.
reason why I can't do my thing over here and you can't respect like some basic ideas of like, hey, don't kidnap me, don't shoot at me. Like as
Yeah,
long as people aren't bothering each other and there
bro,
isn't
that does not sound like right wing libertarian stuff. That
well,
sounds much closer to left wing
for the
libertarians.
record, I do believe in some form of and my co-host Kareem Mays is much more on the left wing side of the
Oh,
libertarian
interesting.
spectrum. And he's typically on the panel shows with me, but he's he's in really big into the coalition building thing and this idea of like, hey, if libertarian socialists and libertarians and ANCOMs and
Mhm.
ANCAPs and all these groups all go, we don't like what's going on in Yemen, then why can't
Yeah.
all those groups work towards that? They might disagree on other stuff. It doesn't really matter at the end of the day. And
Yep.
the way I've always said that is once things work to an end, right? Once, if that ever works and there's a version that we come out of it with some form of unity or separation, regardless, I think as long as everyone isn't at each other's throats or trying to impugn their stuff on other people, then it'll be fine. You're not
Okay.
like,
I want to address Grinning Guys in the thing. Grinning Guys has a question for you. So we're talking about like private property, right? So we're talking about like, yes, libertarianism, like people should be free, people should be able to do whatever they sort of want. And this is a good question because this is like where it kind of breaks down between the left and the right. I mean, one of the places. Uh, and should we allow one group to own things for a living and another group to work for a living? And what do you think about
so
that?
that's, yeah, I mean, so for instance, like I don't have an issue with somebody working for money, or working
Yeah.
for property or whatever the case may be.
So you want to
Um,
keep money. You're like, you know what? Abolish the
no,
state. Keep
I,
keep money.
I,
We'll keep
I
money.
don't think you have to keep. I don't think you have to keep the same money. I don't like U.S. currency the way that it's operates, obviously, but
Hmm.
I do think that some form of trade or value. I mean, like again, taking it back to like the way I know things over here, it's like, well, yeah, if the state wasn't around, I imagine the people in Alaska would go back to trading in seal fur and gold. Like that was the trade commodities back
Silver
in the
and
day.
gold. Silver and gold.
And
Remember Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer? That song.
yeah.
It's funny because silver sounds a lot like silver, but it's a totally
It's
different resource.
seal pelts were like that was top dollar
Silver
here.
and gold.
I don't even
Sorry.
know what
Oh,
they use them for. Now that
seal
I think
pelts. I don't
about
know.
it,
They're probably like waterproof or something. Maybe they made
that's
them
probably
into
it.
raincoats. I don't know.
Yeah, I'm
Sorry.
not sure, but they
Apologize for my
used
ignorance.
that was like the trade commodity, right? That was like the currency before like US involvement and obviously
Yeah.
dollars and all that
So
stuff was
like
introduced.
you're talking about like a barter system.
Yeah, I think there'd be some system in place for me to work for some form of payment,
All
whatever
right.
that
So
may be.
like
I don't have
you
an issue
you
with
would you
that.
would imagine that there would be some sort of like a barter system, barter and trade system that would be like kind of similar to the way that we use money right now.
Regardless of what it is, I mean, even if it wasn't a barter system and it was a hard currency, whatever it's backed
Mm,
by, I don't see I don't see a problem with somebody not using it, but I think that
mhm.
people should be able to do that. Like, for instance, like even wacky stuff like the idea of like mining towns. Like there were a lot of those in this state where people worked for literal nothing. Like they were making tokens that you could only use at the general stores, right? That sort of situation
Uh-huh.
was weird because you had certainly some people who signed a contract who agreed to do this thing, right?
Mhm.
But on the exact same side, you also had those companies basically making it so that people couldn't quit because they couldn't leave the places that they got trapped at. You had some individuals who didn't sign contracts, were just offered these jobs and shown up and were basically forced into taking the work. And so those situations, I'm like, well, no, you can't do that. That's different. But I don't see a reason why somebody can't work for money, like
Right, right, right,
that kind
right,
of
right.
situation.
So yeah, it looks like we got a couple of right libertarians in the chat here, Benzo Barbie and JC over there.
They're
Uh,
normals. They're
good to see everybody.
they're normally in my chat, JC and
Okay,
Benzo.
gotcha, gotcha, gotcha. And so like JC here, mining towns were only possible because of the government. I don't think that's true. I mean, like that's a very common
So
kind of libertarian, like right
I would
libertarian
say
argument.
that might be true for areas like some of the more, I would almost say, comical examples that they bring up out of Kansas and some of these states. Those situations were sort of in place because of the way that the mining structures were placed on the corporations to begin with. But what was
Right.
going on in Alaska was more of a bait and switch, because you had this big rush of miners that would enter the state because of the gold rush. And, they would enter through the Klondike, or they would come in ships. And this is where Canada gets connected to the gold rush. But
Oh yeah, no, we had the gold rush, but you
yeah,
guys took
during
the
the Yukon.
panhandle from us.
Yeah, that
And we were like, oh
was
fuck,
we
that's where all the
definitely did
gold
do
was.
that. But there was
Just like
there
look
was
at a
when
map of Alaska with like the panhandle, guys, and you'll see like the US was like, we also get all this coastal area, and it's
yeah,
literally called that because it makes Alaska look like a frying pan. Like it's got
yes.
like this big fucking, it makes no sense. It's like looking at Chile on a map. It's
There
just like this
was
long fucking coastal
part of the reasoning
weird area.
and I only know this because I'm making a like mini doc thing on this guy named Joe Vogler that lived here. But
Yeah.
there was a lot of debate when statehood took place here in the 50s, because
Mhm.
the argument was with that area, and the reason it became so contentious is because there's like 9 tribes that all exist within that one little space. Well, it's not
Yep.
little, for
Oh,
the record, it's
when
huge.
people the
But
people who make borders don't consult with the indigenous
right.
people of the
So
land
so
before they
what
do that shit.
happened is
They don't
sort
give a
of the
fuck.
opposite. What happened here is a little bit of the opposite. The Alaska side had a bunch of, like, at that point in the state, the chiefs of some of the tribes over here owned a ton of oil land. So they actually got a legit seat at the table, and they were able to kind of use that as pull. And so
Mhm.
when the state lines and stuff were being decided by the feds, they argued in case basically for these certain tribes that they had under their umbrella to get kind of this borderline draw. And so it
Sorry.
was
Who argued for this? The
there
tribes?
was it, I can't remember the exact tribes, but there was 2
Okay.
native tribes here in Alaska that
Okay.
were involved in the
In the
argument for
panhandle.
how the panhandle would be drawn as far as the borders go, because they were
No.
like, well, there's this other group that's over here, and they were like trying to explain to
Yeah.
the but it's a whole
Um
mess. The statehood thing is when it
yeah.
happened was
Um no, it's wild. But okay, so Zero Cool is God says you guys kind of got off topic with the money question. Should people be able to make money solely from owning things, landlords and such? I
oh,
will answer
okay.
this question directly. No, that shit is fucked up. Landlords are ticket scalpers for property. Human shelter is a right. Like there should be no one who is making money off of just owning land. That shit's ridiculous. What does your landlord do? What does your landlord do? You come over to your house like once a year whenever there's like a leaky ceiling, or does he maybe like send a contractor over to deal with a broken faucet or whatever? Landlords are parasites on society and they should not exist. So that is my like direct answer to the question.
So no,
But I think maybe we disagree on that, or
we do, and I will address it. I know Grimming in the chat. This is, but no. So I misunderstood I before, I guess, but no. As far as like the rent question goes, I do think that if I want to buy a piece of land, I want to,
mm-hmm.
Even taking away the apartment or the housing part of it, and using this as like, and this is where I want to see if your answer is different, and this is going to affect the way that I kind of address it, but if we were not talking about a house, right? If we were talking about, I just have an empty lot and I want to rent out booth space to a bunch of people to sell products in that empty lot.
Okay.
Do you have a problem with that?
Yeah, kind of.
Okay.
Well, I mean, like in my ideal
so then it's not
world,
the housing thing, it's the property part. If
yeah.
that's my understanding.
I mean, it's both, but yeah.
But
So
right.
I see your argument is like, because I said like people have a right to shelter, like it's a human need or whatever. And you're like, well, what about businesses or whatever? And I
Well,
still think
just
the
in
same thing. And you're
general,
like,
like,
okay, so it's not just about that. So yeah, that's fair. But I also think in my ideal world, like I'm pretty radical, so I don't expect everybody to agree with me on this. But I think that we just shouldn't have money, and I think we shouldn't have a state, which I know you agree with, or maybe you don't go that far, but like
no, I
that's a
agree
that's
with
a,
no
that's a
state.
libertarian. Okay, cool.
I'd hit the
Um,
button. I
yeah,
think that's what
no
most
state.
people say. The
So that's basically the one thing that like left and right libertarians agree on. The state sucks. Get rid of it. And then there's everything else that like leftist libertarians want to do, which is eliminate all hierarchies. Because like if you can agree that a state is bad, right? And a state is bad because there's a disproportionate amount of power, right? So any
yeah,
kind
but
of
see, I
hierarchy is
don't see.
bad.
I disagree with that though, because,
Is
and
it?
I think
Okay.
that's where my separation becomes, is because I agree
Yeah, yeah,
with
yeah.
you in
Let's get into
some
it.
parts. I agree with you in some parts that, for instance, power being exalted by certain people is bad. The government action part, right? The monopoly on violence. Um,
Right. So that's
but
the Max Weber, was it? The definition of a state is whoever has the monopoly on violence, aka a state is the
right,
only one that's allowed to use force with the
correct.
police, military. If anyone else tries to use force to get what they want, there that's not allowed.
Right.
But
Also a great documentary if people want to watch. I think it's still free on YouTube, but was a Monopoly on Violence, is made by Pete Quinones. It's not really a left or right leaning documentary, but it's just
okay.
it's not. He took a more unbiased stance on it, but it has right wing libertarians in it. But it
Does it have
covers
left wing
what
libertarians in it?
yeah, there are some
Okay, okay,
actually,
okay, okay,
but
okay, okay.
it covers like the monopoly of the state and how it operates and like what it is. And that's one of the things that I would kind of put forward is the reason I don't
Yes,
have an
I
issue
just
with
looked it up, and it was Max Weber who had that definition. Max
yeah, that's
Weber, Weber. And it's not Weber because I made that mistake in my video on ANCAPs. I said Max Weber, and people call me out. It's Max Weber.
well, no, see, and like, so here's this is what I think the argument I see and from Grimming guys. This is
Grinning
the
guys, by the way, I completely agree with. I think.
So this is the argument that I see against what would be branded as right-wing libertarians the most, and this is if they want to get rid of the state because they want nothing in the way of their abuse. Well, this is the reality. Like, I don't have the ability in my situation, and I would argue most of the quote ANCAP or right-wing libertarians are not in any
Yeah,
situation
like I
to
know you don't
do that.
you like labels, but like, are you like an ANCAP or a libertarian? Because like,
Um, I do
like
think
which one were you
there's
closer to?
the problem is that I think there is a pretty step line separation between ANCAPs and libertarians. I don't think they can be as cohesive as people think. And
You mean
so
cohesive? You mean like separate?
yeah, I think they have to be a little bit separate in a sense. So I think the
Okay, so
ANCAP
yeah,
side of
they're
it is
separate.
more based in theory, whereas the libertarian side of it has become more based in political action side of things, and that more of side of it. If I'm talking to somebody on the street, I'm not going to say I'm an anarcho-capitalist libertarian with, but
Oh,
I
you
also
do
don't
not
like
say
these.
mixed company. No, I don't
Right,
tell people any of
right.
that shit.
So,
No,
but
no,
at the
no, no.
same time, I think, like, for instance, like theory to me is a tool. It can be
Yeah,
used by any political faction to make their opinion seem correct. So you might see a leftist quoting Chomsky, and I've heard anti-war rightist quoting Chomsky. So this is
yeah.
an example of that. I've
Well,
seen
Chomsky is just a smart guy, and
right.
no
Well,
one agrees with everything he says.
so
I
this
don't agree
is
with everything Chomsky says.
so this is a
I
perfect
agree with a lot
example,
of it.
right? Is like I feel as though that's correct. They're smart people. And so because they're smart, everybody's going to kind of pick and choose what they like about it and make that kind of fit their narrative in the
Mhm.
same way that somebody like arguing against the trans stuff does, or somebody arguing um against back in the day when gay rights were still being debated in politics and people were making
Right.
those assumptions, right?
Well, I
I
like
think
that
that's
you're like you're a libertarian, like a right libertarian, but you're like a trans rights guy. You're like gay rights guy. I assume.
yeah, no,
You're
I
against
don't
those
have
stuff.
anything. I don't have any problem
Yeah.
take the idea of Alaskan castle doctrine, which is the idea of whatever you do in your castle or like in your like day-to-day life is your business
Is that
kind
what
of
that's called?
idea.
Alaskan castle doctrine?
So castle doctrine of Alaska is slightly different than other states because
Huh.
castle doctrine in other states is more geared towards like self-defense. But back
Mm-hmm.
in the day,
That's what I thought.
um,
Like stand your
back in the
ground type shit, right?
right, but back in the day, Alaska used that as the pretense to become the first state to legalize marijuana realistically, because they
Ew.
said, well,
Where's
the
my weed
castle
at? Where's my
doctrine
weed?
actually applies to everything because if you're in your home and the cop doesn't see it and you're not bothering anybody who can do anything about it. So for a while there were people in Alaska that were like kind of in the gray area, legally able to do whatever drug they wanted. Like
That's
and
fucking
so,
awesome.
there's
That's another thing that I think both types of libertarians agree on: drugs,
mhm,
legalize it, right? Or decriminalize it, even better.
decriminalize it. Yeah,
Decriminalize it.
get rid of the
Don't
government
involve. We
involvement
don't
of
need to
anything.
involve the government.
It's the
Drugs
same
are just
reason
like
why
a thing you should be able
it's
to
the
do.
same reason why on the choice debate thing I'm very like not decisive because I'm like I this is a debate that's not I like you can't but
Yeah.
the theory on both sides of this are tangled in a way that you can
Hmm.
never really get to the like center of the Tootsie Pop. Like
Hmm.
this is stupid.
It
And
is
so
stupid.
I've
I
just
agree with you.
excluded myself from covering it at all. I'm like I
I
don't.
totally agree. I just want to say, like, so okay, so I I didn't grow up in Alaska. I didn't grow up in the US. I grew up in Canada. Certain things Canada is just way more left on. Uh Notably Medicare and healthcare. But I grew up in like a small town, like a religious town, like a pretty like a very conservative town, actually, extremely conservative, anti-abortion, whatever. And I can sort of kind of like understand where you're coming from. I think that like your political ideology is a lot based on your own personal experiences and people and
Oh,
things you've been
sure.
exposed to, like, right, like you've been saying. But I feel like just like listening to you speak, man, I gotta say, I don't think you sound to me like as much of a right libertarian maybe as you think, because you're mentioning like certain things like honestly the trans being like pro trans rights is huge, right? That's like a big thing, because for left wing anarchists or libertarians, we can call it left wing libertarians, we are very much like against hierarchy and like trans rights, like the hierarchy of cisgendered people versus transgender people, straight people versus gay people, white versus black, straight versus gay. I think I already said that. Whatever. Man versus woman, right? All of these hierarchies, left libertarians are against all hierarchies. That is like the definition of anarchism,
Right.
definition of like libertarianism.
I don't necessarily I don't necessarily prescribe to getting rid of all hierarchies. Like I think that
Like,
there
okay, okay,
are
okay.
some
That's the difference. So what hierarchies do you want to keep? Because they're all bad, aren't they?
well so I
Like you're
do
against the
think
state. Like why do you want to keep like big business?
well, so for instance, I wouldn't call it big business in the same way. Like for instance, like I don't necessarily know that I would want a completely corporatized world, but I also think that's a lot harder to obtain.
Oh, that would be so much worse than what we currently have.
So,
The
well,
problem with right now is that it's pretty much a corporatized world. If it
see,
was
I don't know about that
completely,
cuz I think a lot of people mistake corporatism for convenient placement.
hmm,
I think the government and the way that our culture has kind of morphed around the government and is weird and it's become really wonky and I don't think it's as easily explainable as well we can do this and this will happen anymore. Like I think it's
right,
become more not I don't want to use the word segregated, but it is kind of politically segregated. And I don't mean this
right,
in like we need to balkanize and but it's more of a like there's just a general, for instance, with the trans issue. If you walked up to the majority of people and asked them what their opinions on trans rights were, I don't even think they would actually have one. I think we have been kind of, by the internet and just culture being about politics in general, these kind of man on the street style way we absorb what we think the world is like a really bad way to look at it. I think the majority of people, if you say, should this adult be able to do this thing? If you argue back and forth that person for a second, they're gonna come to the realization that yeah, they should be able to do it. I think when you get to kids, that becomes a touchier subject, and I think it becomes something more that you're gonna have to like flesh out over time, and it's gonna be a more vigorous debate because
You
I
said
think
kids when it comes to kids?
yeah, when you, the so like with the trans stuff and what happens in like the media
I mean, oh,
culture,
well, we can talk about this if you want, like trans, like
but
you're talking about like hormone blockers.
just all of it. I don't even think it's
What do you
just
mean
the hormone
all of it?
blockers.
What do you mean all
Well,
of it?
I think that the way that culture, specifically pop culture, media, everything has made it a debate as to whether these people should exist, which is something that is stupid to be saying or having the debate of in the first place. And so even the people who are quote allies to trans people are in a way hurting the existence of actual trans people because they are debating whether or not, because the argument shouldn't be whether or not these people exist or whether or not they should get a certain type of treatment by a certain group of people. It should be that these people do exist, that they have these rights because they're citizens or they're whatever the case may be. They have these abilities that every adult has here in the country, and that's just how it works, whether you like it or not. And
Sorry,
that isn't the debate.
sorry. I think I must have tuned out for a second. Wait, we're talking about trans kids, right?
Well, no, I'm referring more towards the debate in total, but more on the
trans
kids thing.
debate.
Yeah, the trans kids issue. I don't think you're ever going
Like
to get
the trans debate, like the trans debate, such that it is
yeah,
like,
you know
are
what I mean
trans
by
people satanic?
Yeah, well, that's
or
what
are
I'm
they
saying
just
is
people?
stupid. That's what I'm saying is
Okay,
stupid. Is
yeah,
that
that
argument?
is stupid. That is stupid.
But by people who are allies entering that debate and arguing against the people who are saying these people are devil worshippers and that whole kind of context,
Okay.
I feel like are actually doing a disservice, because in reality, those people need to be pointed and laughed at or just ignored entirely, because that's how that culture changes and dies out.
Yeah, no, I mean, like, so like that's like kind of like, I mean, I don't know. I'm not going to say that there's nothing to that. I think that like people give a lot of daylight to these sort of like very fringe reactionary ideologies just by engaging with them. But I don't think that that's, I don't know. At the end of the day, like I get into a lot of arguments in the comments of libs of TikTok on Twitter with people who are like, this is Satan.
Well, libs of TikTok
Satan
is
told
part
that man to put on a bonnet.
Libs of TikTok is part of that media machine I'm talking about that's turning it into that argument. And I think, by the way, Libs of TikTok is bad for grabbing the content and putting it out there. I also think a lot of the
Libs of TikTok is a stochastic terrorist.
I think a lot of the stuff on the other end, the content that a lot of the stuff she grabs that I see are of people who are clearly children. And it's like, okay, well, here's the thing. Let's talk about, like, obviously it's bad that she's grabbing this content, and if people want to ridicule her for that, fine. But at the same time, there's also the fact that like these kids who are pretty young are putting this content out onto the internet. There isn't parents that seem to be stopping that from happening, and some people will make the argument.
What content are you talking about, real quick?
Well, okay. So, like, my idea is I don't necessarily know that I would want my kid, and I'm talking like a 13, 14-year-old, regardless of what they are, who they
somebody
are,
who's about to go through puberty.
Is. Right. I don't necessarily want that person
or is going to.
Right. I don't necessarily want that person putting videos of themselves up on the internet for other people to see.
And you're not just talking about trans kids, you're talking about kids.
I'm talking about kids in general. I think there is
honestly,
I think that's a conversation. There's a misguided tendency in younger parents, which are what we have.
So you don't need to make this about libs of TikTok, because now you're just talking about
not.
Kids
but I think it is about libs of TikTok, because I think what happens is is she grabs content off of those people's TikToks and puts them out there on Twitter because she knows it's going to get reactions from both sides of the fence, right? The allies are going to attack libs of TikTok. That's going to give her
Yeah,
reactions on Twitter and on social media. And then all of the people that like what she's
that's
putting
fair.
out there and want to call devil, devil, devil will jump on the whole train too and give her more of a push towards fame.
Mhm.
And at the same time that's happening, the people who are creating the content, putting it up on TikTok, who are sometimes children, their parents, nothing's happening there in the sense of no one's realizing maybe our kids shouldn't be doing this. Or maybe the content shouldn't be going up because it's buried in this Twitter drama. And
I mean, that seems kind of victim blamey. I was
I
with
do
you when
think
you're talking about like,
when I put it
children
out,
are, it's maybe harmful for them to be on social media in general. Like that's actually something that I think
well, no,
is
I
a
do. I
worthwhile
think it
conversation.
is. I
I
think it
think
is
I
because
think
I
in
think,
general, I don't think
yeah,
you need to be like
uh,
harass them and send the Proud Boys after them. Like
no, I don't think you should
you don't
do
need any
any
of
of
that.
that.
You can just talk about how social media is harmful to developing minds. You know?
No, no, I definitely don't think that's the case. And to be honest with you, I don't like the idea of any Twitter account that's sharing videos from TikTok of minors. Like I don't like the
Mhm.
idea of that in general. So the idea of libs of TikTok always kind of rubbed me the wrong way because of that.
Oh, Libs of
It
TikTok is the worst account like on Twitter, like
uh,
the most one of the most harmful accounts.
and I do
Okay,
think,
but back to back to the kind of libertarian kind of perspective here. Um, just because I don't know, I feel like things are maybe breaking down a bit here. If we're talking about like ownership, right? Like I saw somebody mention this in the chat earlier. I forget who, that like the state is not a meritocratic, form of hierarchy, whereas other hierarchies are meritocratic. Like, as in, the higher up you are on the hierarchy, the more you deserve to be there. Now, this is something that I personally entirely disagree with. I think that is a ridiculous claim. That people who have more power generally deserve it. And I'm curious what you would say about that. Like, for example, like wealth. Like, if we're just talking about class, we're not going into race, gender, or whatever. Just like wealth. Do you think
well,
people who have more money deserve it?
I think the definition of deserve is very hard to come to, but I think
Okay,
people
did
who
they
have
earn it?
more money I think people who have more money could have owned it. I think often it's inherited, so there's that. But I
Mhm.
think that you can have many situations where a guy gets richer because he's already rich, right? Like those are a
You
lot of
have
what
a
happens,
lot of situations like that. Yeah,
right? So I
most
think that
situations.
that is earned as in the person's doing some kind of work output to get the money
Oh, it's
regardless of how
earned.
small it is.
Inherited wealth is earned.
Well, inherited wealth I think is no, I don't think inherited wealth is necessarily earned. It's earned
Necessarily,
by
like it's earned sometimes.
well, I could so for instance, like if I die and I put money in a trust, but that trust is invested in things, the kid has an option to pull that money out. He doesn't, he leaves it in there and then he makes a bunch of money out of it. He did technically earn the money within the stocks or whatever.
All
So
right,
like
but
I
what
could
about
see
somebody
that
who's
happening.
like just as smart as that guy
But
about the stocks and business, and maybe even smarter than him, but they didn't grow up with enough capital to actually invest, and they, died broke.
right.
You know?
Well, yeah, I mean, so again, I can't legislate or change or destroy somebody's ability to make wealth on the pretense that they're going to leave it to their kid. Like I don't see a moral way to do that.
I do. I
Um
do. I see one
well, I think that's where we probably
that we
disagree.
should abolish money.
Well, I don't think abolishing money solves that problem at all.
How so?
Because okay, you abolish money. All right, fine. I have so does that mean property as well?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. There's no property. There's no private
So
property.
so I can't own anything.
Well, you can have your own. I think you have like a right to like privacy and things. You can have your own kind of place that is yours. You can have your own toothbrush, whatever.
Mhm.
You just can't own like the means of production, and you
Yeah.
can't own like things that land. You know what
Yeah,
I mean?
that's never going to be something that I agree with. And that comes from the fact that the idea that The idea that somebody else, if I build something, can come and take it from me, or the idea that somebody can dictate whether or not I can do something because I feel joy in
Mhm.
it, I don't think is ever going to be something you get people to go along with.
Sorry,
Now, I
wait.
think you might get a small group of people to,
You're
and you
saying
might get
that
a whole country to, but I
if
don't think you're.
sorry, wait. If you're telling people that things they find joy in, they can't do.
Well,
What do you
okay,
mean?
so like, say I have joy in collecting stamps, right?
Right.
Say that's what I get joy out of, right? That's property. So you're
Uh,
telling me I can't
yeah,
have
it's like
joy.
personal property. Personal property.
Right,
Yeah.
you're telling me I can't have joy.
No,
That's
you.
what you're telling
No,
me.
no,
That
I'm
that
not.
is.
No, come on, Layden. I'm not saying that.
Okay, so
You
let's
can have a
let's
stamp
expand
collection.
that. Let's expand that.
You can have
Say
stamp. You
you're
can
like
totally
the
have a stamp
people who
collection.
lived thousands of years ago and you like jewelry, okay?
Yeah.
So you buy up lots of gold jewelry. At
Yeah.
what point does somebody get to decide that I can't do that?
No one gets to decide that, and also we live in this potential hypothetical world where there's no money. So
Okay,
gold
so
jewelry isn't even like, it's not something that we need. It doesn't help
okay.
people
Yeah,
eat. It
I
doesn't
think
help people
that's a little
whatever.
fantastical, but
You think so?
let's say you like like I so what? You assume that nobody gets joy out of owning property.
What? Oh, I mean, um, like so, like I think that this is like a kind of maybe a common misunderstanding the difference between personal property and private property, and private property meaning like
I know people who
the
get joy out of offering services with private property. So
like
are you
they get joy
taking
from
that
their
from
work.
absolutely.
Yeah, totally. So there's will still be work in the glorious anarcho-communist
Right, okay, but
world.
say my idea of fun is owning a hotel or an
Um,
apartment complex,
like
which
you
you've
the
just said
joy out of
I
owning
don't
it,
know
like
what people get joy out of. If somebody gets the
right. So
idea that they
somebody gets joy out of owning like private property.
why not?
Yeah, I mean those people don't get to do that. Sorry, I
Right.
guess yeah, that's joy for them.
Yeah.
But what about people right now who get joy out of not being homeless? Because those people are fucked if they're
Right.
homeless.
So do you again, I don't
So
see the
so you're
the
you're saying like
what you're prescribing to me is the easiest way to get those homeless people that don't have the leg up like eradicated by upper classes.
oh really? But in this
Yeah.
world, it's also classless. We don't have class. We don't have money.
Yeah,
We don't
that's
have
that
spirit.
lasts all about 15 minutes.
I mean,
That
I don't know.
you're going to have a group that decides that those people don't deserve what they have more than them and they're going to beat them with clubs. That's
So
what I
yeah,
see being the
there
reality.
there will be like let's imagine we live in this world, and it's not an easy thing. It's like this is like a big ask. I get that. This is maybe not possible, but it's a goal. It's something to strive towards. Where there a world with no hierarchies, world with no state, no class. Obviously, class is a hierarchy. Also, totally egalitarian among genders, races, everything. Like this is like pie in the sky stuff. This is like
Well, I
the
know.
the opening bit. But then we've got no money, we've got no private property because private property accumulates, and somebody who gets a little bit of private property gets more power, and they have more input on how things are done. They have more control over people, and then they get more private property, more power. Private property referring to land, the means of production, like a factory, something like that, or money, like things like this. Um, just like power.
Yeah,
Like these people
my big
are,
separation comes from the fact that I think it prescribes far too much assumption on how humans will react to situations. And
yeah,
secondly,
I see human
how
nature, basically.
classes no, not simply human nature. It's more analytical than that. Human nature can be prescribed to anything. You pick it out of a bushel. There's certain things that history, not just history is in the sense of like, well, this happened 2,000 years ago, 3,000 years ago. Humans are not going to live in a situation where they cannot have some form of will in the sense of I feel like I need to do this thing or I have a calling to do this thing or this
Hmm.
thing is what I should do. If you
Yeah.
start putting barriers in front of that, I don't think it lasts very long. I
So
could
you're
be
you're talking
wrong.
about like the entrepreneurial spirit. right?
Not just the entrepreneurial spirit, but just the spirit to build things, to construct stuff, to want to do
But there's
something
still
for
going
the
to be
future.
stuff that gets constructed,
It's not the same,
Why
and
not?
it's much more
I mean, it's
utilitarian,
different, but
and
yeah, which is good. What's wrong with
that's not good.
utilitarianism? You don't want people
Utilitarianism
to be
is what is
happy?
slowly killing my state.
What? How so?
uh, the generic crap that government planning and planning in general brings with it is absurd, and that's all that breeds.
Sorry, wait, explain.
Planning, the idea that we need to put things in place in the same manner. That is what that will ultimately create.
Yeah. Huh? We got to put things in place in the same manner? What do you mean?
Well, because you have no manner of deciding how things should be put in place to create what you just described. Like, how do you take
Oh,
away people's
like you're
ability
saying,
to
how
do
do I
those
get
things?
there?
How
I
do you
don't
get
know.
there without them killing you or beating you with a club?
Like it's not been very successful in the past.
Well,
There's been
likewise
attempts.
on my side of
There's
things,
been
so we have
attempts.
that
There's
in
been attempts.
common.
There's been Catalonia in Spain, maybe one of the better examples. That was like an actual anarchist kind of community where they had this sort of situation. It was within like a fascist state, and it got, um, killed
Wear a
by like
helmet.
all states. Yeah, wear a helmet, probably be good. YouTube. Um, but
Uh,
I don't know. I do think it is possible. I do think that like
by the
mutual
way, I
aid
don't
is
think
part of
what
human
you
nature.
described is impossible. I just don't think
Hmm.
it's possible on a, a country scale, planetary scale, the whole US, that kind of
We
situation. I don't
well,
think there's any reason why you can't have what you described in a state or
yeah.
country or,
Well, you mentioned
obviously
small
stateless,
communities. You
but
mentioned small communities
yeah, I
for
think it
your kind
works
of
much
perfect
better
world.
like that.
Same thing with ANCOMs. That's what they want.
Yeah. So I'm in
Small
agreement with
communities too.
that as long as you're not okay.
Yeah.
Again, I have no problem with that as long as there's 300 miles away another community that wants to live differently and you guys aren't going to be throwing stones, which is, and
Like
vice versa, by the way. Like,
yeah.
I wouldn't respect the people who are aggressing against the people who want to live like Ancoms. I'm not like, I think anybody who would be unprincipled. I think the idea
Right.
here is that you have to be okay. Well, I know that I don't want to live like that. And
Yeah.
so I know there's people who probably also won't want to live like that. But if the people who want to live like that accept that, then nobody should give a
Mhm.
shit. Like,
Yeah, like Gritting Guys brings up in the chat, anything that can be organized hierarchically can be organized horizontally. And I think that's true. I think that like horizontally structured, businesses, we could have like restaurants and, corporation type things that are horizontally organized. People take turns doing things that, making decisions for the company. Maybe people elect a leader. Like you like democracy, right?
me,
Yeah.
not entirely, but to the
No, eh?
degree on a
Mm.
smaller scale.
Okay.
I
So
don't
like
think it works on a state or country
I mean,
level. No.
right now, I agree that it doesn't work. The democracy that we have right now in Canada and in the US is a joke. It's not real democracy.
Well, this is
Um,
probably one area where we agree in is that it's
mhm.
democracy in the West and in Canada has been completely turned into a cronyist fucking shit show. So it's
Yeah, capitalist
it,
shit show. Exactly. Yeah, yeah.
yeah.
It's a neoliberal, controlled by elites. There's suppression of
I don't
dissent,
disagree
and
there.
yeah, no, like the system of democracy we have right now is a joke. It's not a real thing.
Yeah.
But democracy itself is great. I think I would like to have a
I
direct
disagree.
democracy. I would like
I
to be
I
able to
I
vote directly
think
for things.
I think direct democracies are not the way to go.
So
But I
then you believe
see.
in what? A monarchy?
I think Hoppe's ideas are not the worst,
Mm,
but I don't think that
okay.
his prescription for, again, I think it's too blanketed. I think that you're going to have communities that don't want to have a quote unquote president in the sense that it exists, or king, or whatever the sense may be. Those people will probably have no problem doing more of a Senate style political setup. But there are going to
Mhm.
be areas, I imagine, that will want to legitimately put forward some kind of guider that is more of a king position or some form of monarchy. I don't necessarily know I'm
Huh.
against it. Again, on a
I
smaller
don't think
scale,
that
I'm
that's what
not
people
against
would
any of it.
want, but I think that if we had a, ANCAP society, yeah, it would basically be feudalism. It would be the like Jeff Bezos would be your king, and Jeff Bezos would hire an army of security guard cops types, and we would effectively live under a state. But ANCAPs would be like, no, it's not a state because Jeff Bezos is rich.
Yeah, that's
He deserves his money. It's not a state. It's
that
different.
is the argument that I have heard said, and I think that I think people have a misunderstanding of the scale of how things spread, how it all works. At the end of the day, the reality is that there isn't a person right now that has the type of money to do that. And I think people have this idea that we live in such a capitalist state, which I disagree with. I think we live in a much more cronyist state where the government decides how they want to apply capitalism.
What's the difference between crony capitalism and capitalism?
I believe the government currently decides how capitalism is done, how it is followed, how people are allowed to do it.
So you think that the government controls?
Right. Okay. So we agreed on the
wealthy elite.
legalization of drugs, for instance, a minute ago, right?
Yep.
Okay. That itself, in my opinion, is cronyist. The fact that I cannot go open a business and sell drugs is the government affecting capitalism. They are affecting my involvement in the market. They're affecting my ability to trade my goods and services for dollars. So the same is true for the government deciding that you can't manufacture something that you want to manufacture. You can't affect the market in that way. The same way that the government is deciding on what contracts they're going to pick up and spend tax dollars on. So they're deciding which companies they want to back. That's why Raytheon and these companies have risen to where they are, but a company like them can't compete. The same reason why the USPS.
Wait. Sorry, did I just hear you right? You're saying that like the problem with Raytheon isn't that it
no, it's not the problem
weapons
with
of war and
the effect
is part of
Raytheon is that
the problem is that it's too big and smaller weapons of mass destruction companies can't rise up to compete with it. That's the problem.
What I'm saying is that they don't want competition against Raytheon because then the company that the government in the West controls is the one deciding where all the weapons get sold. It's a way of tracking arms. That's what it is. If you only keep one company being able to manufacture a certain product, then you can track where that product is going, how it's being used, who's buying it, who's selling it. You have a permanent black spot on everything.
Why are we making like guided missile systems and
for the record, I think if Raytheon went out of existence tomorrow, there'd be a bunch of other companies doing the same thing.
Yeah, that's because capitalism encourages imperialism and war.
I also think
war is a racket, Smedley Butler shit.
I also think that if you have a bunch of countries with the access to the same weapons, you get to a situation where you do have a sort of people to government to weapons stalemate in a sense, where a large country doesn't really have a benefit to attack another large country if they both have access to the same weapons, the same general populace, and there's an open market on who can get involved in the war. Like you can have immediate pacts and immediate groups of neighboring groups of people that are saying, hey, if you attack this person, it's going to be a problem. Basically the idea of infinite NATOs or infinite kind of subgroups. The system of NATO I don't agree with, but the idea of it I think is fine. The idea of countries or groups deciding, hey, we are more susceptible to attack, so we want to protect ourselves from those attacks by making agreements. I think you'd just have a bunch of that.
We'd have a bunch of that if what?
Like weapons are a market. Yep. So just like
a free market.
Anything else, I don't think they're free market, but that is what it is. I can't go buy any weapon I want.
Is that the problem with it? Is that it's not a free market?
I think it's part of it because other countries don't have access to it, so the government in the West gets to act like a bully.
Okay, yeah, I mean that's true, but like the way that weapons are sold. Wait, let me just understand let me just see if I understand you. We're talking about like weapons are bad when they're like blowing up like countries and shit, like nukes.
Absolutely.
I don't got a problem with like self-defense, whatever, like guns and shit. I think that like a lot more people should have guns, honestly, especially like marginalized groups, trans people, queer people, black people, women. People should get guns. It is a kind of a necessary thing at this point, in my opinion. But
You're good. Just keep going. I'm just off camera
oh,
for a
hello.
second. Oh, you're good to keep going. I'm just off camera for a second.
Oh, okay. What are we talking about? Wow. Sorry guys. I smoked a lot of weed and I drank some beers, so I'm a little bit not at my best right now. But oh yeah. We're talking about like the military industrial complex. Like that is bad, and that doesn't really have much to do with a state, in my opinion.
Mm. Yeah. I mean, I don't think it does actually.
The state goes into countries and causes this extremely profitable thing called war, not because they're a government and that's what they want to do, but because there is economic pressure from not just arm companies, but uh, oil companies. If you look into the CIA coup in Guatemala, it was about fucking bananas. It was United Fruit, like Chiquita
Yeah.
banana.
Yep.
They were like, oh, like our Benz is nationalizing the fucking banana fields that we aren't even using. Like we don't even use them. We just own them and we don't let other people use them. And our Benz is like, actually, we're like dying. We need to like make a little bit more money and have a good economy within this country. We're gonna like reclaim your land. We're gonna pay you what it's worth. And they've been lying about how much it was worth, so they paid less tax. And they're like, that's not. It's worth way more than that. And then the fucking Banana Man Sam or whatever his name was, I don't remember. It was like buddies with Alan Dulles and
Dole.
Buster
That would be
Dulles.
Dole. Yeah.
No,
That
that's
was
Dole was Hawaii.
Is that a different? Oh, you're right.
Dole's
You're right.
Hawaii.
My mom's from Hawaii, so that's what I'm thinking.
Hawaii is yeah. The illegal.
Mhm. Yeah, I mean,
and,
the only thing I would
led to they put Dole, who was a wealthy capitalist, they put him in charge of the state. He became the ruler of Hawaii, and his family came over to Hawaii and made tons of money on pineapples, Hawaiian
Yeah.
pineapples. So yeah. No, like basically every time the US has really fucked up a country, they've gotten a massive economic benefit out of their natural resources.
Well,
So this
for
is
the record, I
this
mean,
is
that is the
the
Western
capitalism. This is wealthy capitalists affecting what the government does, not the other way around. It's not the
See,
government telling capitalists what to picking which capitalists get to be rich. It's capitalists telling the government what to do.
I disagree with that, but I understand where you're like the conclusion you're coming to is the same conclusion. It's just I don't think it was as much of the capitalist as it was the government. I think
Really? But how can you think that?
I think capitalists are opportunistic. So I think if you put I think if you put money in front of them, they're going to take it. In most positions, especially
like, why would the U.S., for example, with Hawaii, why would
the
they
U.S.
do
government
that
makes
if
a
it wasn't for
contract?
capitalists?
The U.S. government makes a contract, and they want something done. They don't care what capitalist comes to them and tells them can get it done. They care that somebody can come to them and get it done. This is what the private military market for the West has always been. We go to other countries now, like what's happening in Ukraine, what's happened in Afghanistan, what happened all over the place. They will get foreign countries involved in wars. They put those countries into debt under our system, and then those countries are constantly paying us any money they make back, and that's how we keep the whole thing afloat. The problem with that is that it's certainly not the capitalists that are doing that. The people who want the government system to stay afloat so that the capitalists, I mean, clearly the capitalists are going to make more money if the government doesn't exist. We all agree with that. So they have a vested interest.
Yes,
they have a vested interest in the government not existing. So why would it doesn't make any sense for me?
I feel like you're having you're trying to have it both ways now. Capitalists would make more money if the government didn't exist.
Absolutely.
And the government props up capitalists, and like that's the real problem.
I don't think
if there wasn't a government, there'd be more actual competition.
I never said the government propped up capitalists.
That's more of an argument for my side than for your side.
Right. I think the government is not propping up propping up businessmen or investors or whatever the case may be. They're not propping those people up financially. They're propping them up with power because the government has the conceded energy with it those businessmen don't. So the businessmen have a government saying, we will give you this power if you do this service for us, you'll get all this money. Of course they're going to do it. The government is initiating that to begin with. It's not like I don't think that the businessmen are the ones plotting the invasions into foreign countries. I think the government is plotting
I
an
mean,
invasion into
sometimes
a
they
foreign
literally
country.
do that. Sometimes businessmen
I'm
literally do that. I
sure
think it
that
was
happens, and it has.
Panama. That it was a
Yes.
corporation that like ostensibly had nothing to do with the government, although there's reason to believe that the government provided them with like weapons and
Right.
shit. But yeah, there's been plenty of examples of that. Have you ever heard of the business plot?
No.
It was a attempt by a bunch of like wealthy, modern
Oh,
day equivalents of
actually,
billionaires to overthrow the U.S. government.
do a coup. Yeah,
Uh,
I have.
yeah,
I've seen a YouTube video about this, but I
yeah,
will
yeah.
refresh
No,
myself.
business people don't like, certain
No,
types of people
I
who
guarantee
only
you
care
that has
about
happened.
money, who disproportionately tends to become billionaires and become powerful people, don't give a fuck about anything except for getting more money and more power. And they will kill as many people as they can to get that. And that
Right.
is kind of a system that capitalism encourages and creates.
No, I don't
There's,
think it creates it necessarily. I think that the government, especially today, has
but it
put that.
rewards that behavior.
I think it can reward that behavior. I don't think it always does. No.
Like,
Uh,
are there any good billionaires?
um. Well, there's billionaires who have done really good things for the entire
There's
society.
there's billionaires who have like donated to charity to help their own image.
Well,
Overall, though, there's
the
still
reality
a
is there's been people,
bad
maybe
idea.
not necessarily in this exact modern sense, but there's been billionaires who, for instance, have built scientific academies that have birthed inventors that we never would have had the products they had, never would have had the things they brought to forward. I think that's one
Example?
case to where, well, I think there's an example to be made that an individual billionaire, right? There's only so much one person can do, whether they're rich or not, right? It doesn't really matter regardless. We're all humans. So
Well,
if a
rich people just have
billionaire
more ability to affect
ability to affect,
change.
right, exactly. So if a billionaire gets to the point where they have all this money and they can start affecting change and they start putting that money into teaching other people how to do what they did, which in turn will create jobs or systems for people to make their lives better in turn, then I see that as a net positive. I don't see that as a bad thing.
Like, what's an example of that, though?
Well,
It
I
would be
think
nice if that happened.
there's tons of institutes and work groups and colleges and
Think
different
tanks, think
yeah,
tanks that
even
influence
that.
like government decisions and like write bills for the.
Sure. I'm sure
That's good.
I don't think capitalists have not affected the government, but I also don't
Oh
think
yeah, they
necessarily.
control the government. The
Oh,
government is the
I
shadow
disagree with
cast by
that.
corporations over the people.
All right. Well, yeah, like I said, I think me and you are going
But
to.
you don't have any examples of that,
Yeah,
of
I
billionaires
think
helping the world.
I think that would be my example, is the fact that I think there's a lot of people who would not be able to do the things they were able to do without the things that billionaires created or gave them
I go
or
ahead.
supplied for them.
What do they
Jobs
create?
and wealth and housing and the situation to build the inventions and things they put forward and marketing
The
tools
inventions
and
that
the
billionaires
internet.
made.
And
That billionaires made the inventions.
well, billionaires, people who were maybe poor and became billionaires off the products they made regardless, but there are people at the top who have made billions of dollars who are billionaires who are certainly helping people at the bottom.
Uh, Billionaires are people at the top who have inspired people, or like, but they didn't invent anything.
They don't have to invent anything. I don't think you have to invent jack shit.
But I thought you said that's what's good about billionaires is they invent things.
No, I said billionaires.
Okay, sorry,
For
I'm
instance,
high.
have opened billionaires, for instance, have opened institutions, have opened educational systems, have brought services to
Okay.
places where they previously were not at, things like the internet, stuff like that, that 100% created positive outcomes for the human race. So whether that be that some kid in that
Has the
town
internet
that
been a
didn't have,
positive for the human race?
for a lot of things,
I
I
think that's
agree with you
debatable.
that it hasn't. I think we'd
Yeah.
agree on a lot of that,
No, I don't
but
know. I can't give it up now though. It's
right.
gonna stay. I
There
like it
is
too much.
but there are some positives it does. Obviously, I think.
But like nothing you're saying. Like first of all, you're not, still haven't given me a specific example of anything. I mean, unless the internet is your example. But the internet was invented by like through the army and shit. Like
Right, okay,
not
but
through
right.
billionaires.
Once it's a service and it exists, not everybody had access
But
to
they
it.
didn't invent it. They just sold it.
But that's
They're
my
like
point,
landlords.
is you
Yo,
don't
yo, yo.
have to.
Check this out. Bill Gates like ruined innovation within the computer world by enforcing IP law really intensely, whereas before he
I'm
was
not a
doing
big
this.
fan of IP, for instance.
Yeah. So
So
okay, well that's yeah, like so Bill Gates kind of fucked shit up, and he became the richest man on earth because of that. And he
yeah,
was able to like fuck over all these
and
other
I
small
don't
companies.
agree with a
He
lot of that.
was a brutally like horrible capitalist for most of his life, and then just because he donated to a bunch of charities and created his favorite like things, he's got a lot of concern about overpopulation in Africa, which I think is like pretty sus. But he's now he's beloved. People think he's like he's so kind. Meanwhile, after COVID came out, he was the reason why fucking IP law was attached to vaccines and the
Right. Yeah.
pandemic was prolonged. So he did this before by fucking over like the internet, computers in general would be way better without Bill Gates. I'm 100% sure of that.
I agree with you.
Whereas if if he didn't do it, there would still have been the same motivations within the capitalist framework that we all live under for someone else to enforce IP law
If the
on computer
software
inventions.
was not, if the software had not been
Yeah. I don't want to
taken
say like Bill
over
Gates.
from
It's
that,
it's sort of like the JFK thing, right? Like people are like, if
yeah,
only JFK had
it's
lived, he would have
hard to
done this.
say.
He would have done like barely anything different, in my opinion. But like
Yeah,
the
and I
thing with
actually
Bill
agree
Gates,
with you on that too.
yeah, like Bill Gates is just because of the structures and the systems that we live under, Bill Gates fucked over a lot of innovation. He made innovation worse. Like if
Yep.
we're talking about like the internet is a terrible example about how good capitalism is. The internet was something that was
Oh,
invented in a collective way.
I do disagree with. I don't disagree with that. I think
Okay.
the internet would have probably existed regardless of what happened too, because you already had, people miss it, but there was already like messaging services and things like that that predate the traditional internet. There was already a drive to create that thing. The
Yeah.
reason the government got into it in the first place
Like
was because they were trying to fill that need first,
yeah.
because they saw it as like, well, we have access to this first and it's a leg up on everything else.
The internet
Um,
is one of those things in the line of like inventions that facilitate communication, like the invention of the printing press or
right.
the invention of language, or the invention of just like writing, or like these things were gonna happen.
Yeah.
We were all somebody was always going to invent language. Chomsky can tell you about that.
Yeah.
Somebody was always going to invent writing down language. Somebody was always going to invent printing press, and then eventually someone's going to create the internet. And whatever the next thing is that's big like that will be something that facilitates communication and like changes the world. Right? Like all of these inventions changed the world, and
Yeah.
that was always going to get invented with or without capitalism. Honestly, like, and in the case of the internet, that wasn't even invented because of capitalism. That was,
I'd agree
it
with
was
that.
a
It was more
public
based
thing.
within,
But
yeah.
you're saying it's good that capitalists were able to sell the internet to people. But what if the internet was just
No, more
free,
so,
dude?
more
What if it was
so.
free? What if it was a human right? What if it was like roads? It was a
Well,
public service. What if it was
I
something that
don't
you didn't have to
feel
pay for?
I don't feel that way about it, mainly because I think that, again, it is a service. It's not something. I don't think that the internet is not something that is naturally here. It's not something that we would be able to obtain if you just dropped us anywhere and told us to build stuff, right? It involves a bunch of engineers and people to build up towers and systems to make everything work properly. And like, I'm
But
lucky
like,
because I'm in Alaska. We have like
yeah.
fiber optics, so I have faster internet than people in Kansas who have a different provider and have, it's like, it's a weird kind of thing. But yeah,
Yeah.
I don't wanna like feel like I'm ending things or anything, but it is like an hour and 40 minutes, and I have to eat.
Okay.
So I'm gonna
Oh,
go have dinner with the family.
all right.
Um,
Cool,
if
man.
the I had a really good time talking. This was fun. It
Yeah,
was a
man.
good
Hey,
kind of back
yeah.
and forth.
Got a little bit heated, but yeah, hey, no,
No,
no ill
that's just
will.
fine.
And thanks for having me on. I appreciate
No,
it.
it was a great talk, and I see people in the chat being like, "This is the first time they saw him in a live thing." I didn't know you like weren't doing these as often, so maybe
Yeah, no, I used to stream a lot, but yeah, it's been a while.
yeah. Oh, well, it was really great talking to you. Everybody can go in the description. Anybody who isn't here from Chill Goblin's channel, you can check that out in the description, and then go
Yeah,
check
come
out
on
his
over.
JFK
Benzo
video.
Barbie, you're gonna join my Patreon.
Benzo, go check out his
Benzo
video on
Barbie.
JFK. It's really good.
Benzo Barbie, maybe you can convince me that maybe people should have to pay to have roads built to their house.
I'll catch you guys later.
But yeah.
Thanks for hanging out. Is there anything else you want to plug or do or say?
Sure. Yeah. My name's Chill Goblin, and if you're not subscribed to me, go subscribe. Come on now, what are you waiting for? Even if you're a a right wing libertarian, check out my JFK video. I think you'll probably have a I think you'll mostly be in agreement with me. And maybe I can be your gateway to the radical left.
I'll catch